We're still about a year away from getting the next-gen GTI, which can mean only one thing. It's time to start the official Mark 7 Appreciation Tour! You know, there's no reason to doubt whether the next car is going to be great, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's just take a minute to give thanks for the car that raised the bar yet again for what a hot hatch should be capable of. With all due respect to the Golf R, if I'm buying a VW hot hatch, it's gotta be a GTI. And it's not that I'm a traditionalist, but this thing is just so damn good. And besides, the Golf R has always felt like it's kind of missing something. Something about it's just a little too sterile, and it's not as exciting as a nearly 300 horsepower hot hatch should be. Whereas this thing, it's everything it should be and then some. Obviously, the biggest difference between the two hotted up versions of the Golf are how they put power down. This one is front wheel drive versus the Golf R that's all wheel drive. And this one makes less power, but you know, that's not what makes this thing feel special. There's just something about it that's genuine, and you can feel it as soon as you climb into this driver's seat and start the engine. And speaking of that engine, this 2-liter cranks out almost 260 pound-feet of twist, but this isn't some sort of torque steer monster, and it is very usable. Credit that limited slip differential that comes in all versions of the GTI, and you can hammer on that throttle pedal in the middle of a corner and it will claw its way out without a problem. The only thing that bums me out in here is that there's no way to do a hard launch without slipping the clutch. Sure, you can turn traction control off down here on the console, and if you hold the button down for 5 seconds, it'll show you in the gauge cluster that it's been disabled. But as soon as you dump the clutch and the tires start to slip, traction control kicks back in and it kills power. I also find it kind of hard to get a good heel toe going in here. Now, a big reason why is because my right leg keeps banging up against this big chunk of plastic that comes down off the dash. And long legs and big feet aren't exactly great for heel and toe in the first place, but it's a lot more difficult to do in this thing than most other cars. Take a look at my first gen Miata. It's not a problem, and that's because there's way less clutter in here. But with a little patience in practice, it is more than possible to heel and toe without an issue. I just had to change my style up a little bit to get things dialed. Now, speaking of dialed, you can get quite a bit dialed in here by running through some different drive modes. There are some preset ones like Sport, Normal, Eco, and Comfort, but there's also a cool individual one so you can customize everything from the traction control and throttle response to that locking differential, as well as the steering. You can even adjust the air conditioning, and that just tailors it to the drive. It's actually really cool how it works. The one I'm driving also has adaptive dampers, and you can change those up too. So they do get a little bit stiffer in sport mode. Now, I've been playing with them a lot this week, and I found that my favorite setting is normal, so that there's just a little bit more cushion in the suspension. The damping is just that much better, and it helps you with a little bit of car control, especially when you're pushing it through some of these tighter corners. It's really nice to be able to have the car off balance, load up that suspension, shift the weight forward or back, and you will really feel it working away. Now, like I said, you can adjust the steering settings too, but it doesn't do all that much good. Steering's never been a real strong suit of Volkswagen's, and it really shows in here, and even in the sportiest setting, it's just not all that sharp. Sure, it is really responsive, but there's not much feel and feedback, so you don't really know which directions the tires are pointing, and that can be a problem during spirited cornering, and it would be nice for just a little bit more feel so you had a sense of what was going on underneath you. There's also some fake engine noise that you can pump into the cabin, which does feel disingenuous, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I actually kind of like it. I also love listening to that blow-off valve. It's just so cool out of the factory to have that sound. You turn the stereo off and you can really hear it when you let off the gas. It is awesome. This thing is so much fun to drive, and it is so eager. I love it, but it's also crazy how once you scale it all back, it just cruises around like a regular Golf. Now, granted, it's a diesel wagon, but I own a Mark 7 Golf myself, and it's crazy how similar some of their mannerisms are. The way they cruise around, they're just very comfortable, quiet, and smooth. That's awesome for a commuter car, and if you've watched any of my other videos, you know I love a good dual-purpose vehicle. I think a car like this should suit multiple needs because it's probably going to be a lot of people's only cars. So it's nice that you can have fun with it when you want, but you can also tone it all down and drive to work without attracting a whole lot of attention. Ultimately, that's what's so great about the GTI, and I think it's perfect for the person that's looking for something sporty and fun, but also something that they can drive every day. Now, this one I'm driving is fully loaded, so it comes with leather seats, but Volkswagen wisely offers you a no-charge option to swap those out for these plaid cloth upholstered ones. And I think there's somewhere deep in the Canadian law books that say you can't buy a GTI with anything other than these plaid seats because they are just perfect. But beyond just looking cool, these are some of the most comfortable seats on the market, and I'm talking mainstream or premium. There's just enough bolstering on the sides to keep you planted, but they're also nice and comfortable to gobble up hours of driving with few complaints. I'm not so crazy about Volkswagen's infotainment interface, but at least this 8-inch touchscreen is nice and responsive. And there's also standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but here's a weird beef. It took me almost 5 minutes to get my phone plugged in here before I took off in this thing, and that is not an exaggeration. This cubby is just so small and narrow, so people with big hands are definitely gonna struggle. My best advice, plug your cable in and leave it there. The other thing is, and this is a sign of the Golf's age, that's the only USB port in this entire cabin. How weird is that? Everything else about this cabin is German and practical, so you have these huge door pockets down here and a center pass-through in the second row seats. Now they are 60-40 split folding, but that center pass-through is really handy if you're moving longer items like skis, or in this case, a monopod. You can flip down that center armrest and that hole opens up so you can slide it through there and still fit 4 adults in here. And that's the other thing about the Golf that I love. There is tons of space for people in here, and you can fit 4 full-size adults in here without a problem. That is very cool for a compact car. Headroom too, it's great. There's really not a whole lot to complain about this space, and the same goes for cargo room. There's more than enough for a weekend away, and you can get all your stuff behind the back seats without having to figure out how you're gonna fit it all. It's not a game of Tetris, and that's what I love. But I know that's probably not leading your list of reasons to buy a GTI, and it's really gonna come down to how it drives, and it is absolutely phenomenal. There's just something really special about the way it all comes together. It all builds off of that engine and goes from there. Yeah, the steering feel isn't great, but everything else is. These brakes bite incredibly hard, it's very agile and nimble, and it's just so controllable. It sounds good too, and like I said, I love driving this thing. Not too many complaints from me, and it is a riot. You can really huck it into a corner, and like I said, it's very controllable, so it's not gonna get away from you when you're really pushing it. Some of these corners are very tight on these country roads, and it just goes and goes. And you can feel that diff grabbing as soon as you get on the gas. I am having way too much fun out here. But like I said off the top, there's just that intangible quality that you can't quite describe. It's like that little bit of extra magic that makes something that much more special. And it does feel a little bit old school. This one is getting a little bit too modern, and that's because it's got an options package with all kinds of advanced driver assistance and safety systems. There's blind spot monitoring, forward collision warning with pedestrian detection, lane keep assist, and even adaptive cruise control. Hell, there's even a self-parking system. Not that I think you need it in a car this small. I probably would skip all that extra stuff, but if you've got it on your shopping list, it's only gonna add $1,750 to the price tag of the GTI, which isn't bad at all. And the same goes with the automatic transmission. If you've got that on your shopping list, it's only a $1,400 upgrade, though it's like I always say, if you can drive manual or you want to learn how, there should be nothing holding you back. And this is the perfect car to buy a 6-speed manual. And who knows how much longer you're gonna be able to do that for, so I'd highly recommend it. Even without the automatic transmission, there is no way to sugarcoat just how expensive this version of the GTI I'm driving is. Because it's got that optional driver assistance package, it's 40 grand before tax, and that is expensive no matter how you slice it. But I really think the sweet spot in the GTI lineup is the base car. because you're getting tons of good stuff if you skip the extras. You've got this 8-inch head unit, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and these plaid seats. And from a performance perspective, the only thing you're missing is the dynamic chassis control system that gives you the adaptive dampers. But really, I think they're worth the sacrifice because they don't take away from what's just an excellent car to drive overall. To recap, I love how segment-defining the Mark 7 GTI has been, how great it is as a dual-purpose daily driver, and the plaid seats, obviously. I don't like how hard it is to heel and tow, the fact it's only got one USB port, and the lack of steering feel. At the end of the day, a lot of what makes the GTI so special is tied to the fact that it feels like a Volkswagen Golf just cranked up to another level. And ultimately, that's the way a sport compact car should feel. But as a lot of them have gotten better, faster, and more sophisticated over the years, they've kind of lost that connection to the cars that they're based on. But when you drive this version of the GTI, you can tell exactly where it comes from. You know, the Mark 8 version is going to be better in its own ways because that's the way this business works. But I'll tell you one thing, it's got some seriously big shoes to fill. So here's to hoping it stays true to its roots. Aww.